Welcome to this chess video, everyone. So in this video, I want to share 5 examples of middle game plans that you can actually try. Of course, there's way more than just 5, but these are 5 common plans that I see a lot. And for a lot of people, they end the opening, they finish their opening principles, perhaps develop their pieces, connect their rooks, and then they don't really know where to go from there. So I hope that by giving some ideas, like the examples I'm about to show, you'll have a little bit of a better plan moving forward. First, I have to describe, what do I even mean when I say middle game? Obviously, it's somewhere between the opening stage and the end game for chess, but it's actually not so clear to define what a middle game even is. For most people, that means the point when all of your pieces are finally developed off the back rank, and your rooks are actually connected, which means that basically they quote-unquote see each other and could capture each other. If there was a capture of one of the rooks, they could recapture back. So generally, that's how most people define kind of the start of the middle game and kind of the end of the opening. But maybe a better way to think of it is, there isn't an exact rule of when the middle game is, so kind of when the opening is more or less ending, you can start looking for these ideas. Let's take a look at some examples here. So the first example I want to show is attacking a weakness. And so that is a really good plan that sometimes you can actually do in the middle game. If you notice that your opponent has played something that's given themselves a weakness, maybe you can actually target it, and that can be your plan. So here my opponent actually played the move pawn to b4. And it was actually, I think, a little better in going back. I think they really should have tried c4. And, try to get some kind of break, with this pawn here, some kind of pawn break. And then this pawn is actually supporting them with their advance. But needless to say, they played pawn to b4. And now, the weakness here is this backwards pawn. This c3 pawn is now a target that I can actually gang up on. And so my very first move here, trying to be instructional with my middle game plan, is to first blockade that pawn. And now I can try and double rooks, get my rook behind, possibly even attack with my queen, and hopefully try and exert more and more pressure on this pawn to try and push my opponent into passively defending. So they move to queen here. I double rooks as planned. They have to try and defend this, try and hang on to the material, and then I play queen to e3, again adding more pressure to this pawn. And so this is just one idea that you can do in middle games, where sometimes if the opponent gives themselves a weakness, like say this backwards pawn, I can actually start targeting it right away. Okay, so now let's look at another example here. Some might even argue that we're more or less still in the opening stage, but I'd say this is kind of more of a middle game idea, even though in some cases it comes up in the late opening. Really, whenever you get the opportunity, that's when you need to pounce and actually take it. So here in this case, my opponent has played bishop to d3, and I saw an opportunity where I could gain space. And so gaining space is a really common middle game idea. So here I play d captures c4, they recapture with their bishop, and now I play pawn to b5. And this is nice because it comes with tempo, and so now when they retreat their bishop back, this next move I played was not the only move that was possible, but I actually played pawn to a5. And I've now gained a lot more queenside space than what I had previously just a few moves ago. And I'd like to think that I've made really good progress here. Now going very briefly through the next, just so you kind of see, what I was doing here with the opening, I recognize I still have to get developed. This is a middle game plan. I still need to continue. So, real briefly, I'll just show the next few moves. I develop my bishop next. They castle. I develop my queen next. And now our rooks are finally connected, seeing each other. And, we're off to the next part of the middle game. So now with that being said, I'll continue on to the next middle game example. So the next middle game example here is actually to exchange off a weakness. Not only is it about attacking your opponent's weaknesses, sometimes you might have opportunities to actually get rid of your own weaknesses. And if you can trade them off, that's actually a really nice success for you. Now, I actually did a video on where I can trade off a bad bishop, so you might want to check that out if you get the chance. I'll put the thumbnail up on the screen so you can see what it looks like. Here in this case, we do not have that situation. A little bit different here. Here we have a different weakness. In this case, I have doubled pawns, and this is generally not something I really love for the endgame. So what we have to do here is play bishop to e3. And now, if they take on e3, then, which they actually did in the game, then that actually allows me to trade off my weakness, because now I can actually take back, and now I no longer have doubled pawns. So in that simple trade, I've actually fixed my structure. Now people might wonder what happens if they don't take, because in this case they were not obligated to take that, bishop. In this case, according to the engine, bishop captures e3 is actually the best move. So, I can't really fault them too much for playing the best thing, even though long term it does help me fix my pawn structure. Now, I was completely fine with this if they didn't take. Say, for example, they play a move like, say, knight c6. So if they play a move like knight c6, then I can just castle queenside. And I'm absolutely fine here. I can maintain the tension. And if they ever trade, they're going to help me undouble my pawns. And if not, I can just play on the open file against their king, and you'll continue with other middle game plans. So sometimes you can actually kind of overlap these plans. You don't have to stick with only just one idea. The next middle game plan we have is actually attacking the enemy king. Now, oftentimes that's going to be a very obvious idea when their king is uncastled, it's stuck in the center. Then it's a very obvious weakness that you should be targeting very quickly before it gets a chance to get castled. But here, we have a very nice castled king. Does that mean that I can't attack it? Absolutely not. Of course, we can still attack it if we have the opportunity, and especially if we have much more attackers than they have defenders. I actually made a really old video a long time ago on how to attack like that, and I also have another video on how to attack weaknesses. So I'll put both thumbnails up on the screen, and so you can check those out if you want. Now for this position here, I definitely want to attack their king, so how can I get started? And so what I actually come up with first was bishop captures h6. Which is, looks like a sacrifice, but this pawn actually can't recapture because of the pin. So really, I'm just winning a pawn and adding more pressure to the g7 pawn. Now, they were probably best to try and advance this pawn and just cut their losses, but it's a little hard, to start advancing pawns on your king and not be worried about square weaknesses. So I don't doubt their, thought process here, even though their next move objectively is not so great. So they tried to defend it. They went back with this blunder. And now I actually didn't play perfectly, but I like what I played. I played the second best move, which is knight to h5, and I add even more pressure to this pawn. But that actually gives them the chance to still play g6 and kind of help them rectify their mistake that they actually had on the last situation. What was really good for me instead was to capture here first with the sacrifice, and if they capture back, now I play knight h5, and the pin is just extremely strong, and I have a really nice winning position there. But instead of that, we had this move. They capture this pawn in e5, and now I have a really nice idea that actually finished the game, which is I play knight e to f6, check, and this is actually a forced mate in 5, where, it looks like I have two pieces hanging, but I don't because of the pin, and so they capture back with the knight here, I replace the knight, they're moving their king over, I play bishop captures g7 check, they capture back, and now we have queen to h5, and this is kind of like a Greco's mate pattern. Eventually, they're going to have to sacrifice their bishop here, and then this will be an easy checkmate. Okay, so attacking the enemy king is one idea that you could possibly do in the middle game if the opportunity seems to present itself. Okay, so now here we have the last example, which is to improve your pieces, and especially improve your worst piece. So first of all, in this case, I went back a little bit because I have another instructional point that I really want to show just because it's a nice idea, and the more patterns you know, the better. So the first idea is about us getting castled. I think most people here would love to castle queenside, just get their king to safety. But the problem is I'm actually missing a c-pawn. I have no c-pawn here, so my king would be a little vulnerable there. And so what I actually played I thought was kind of clever, and that's why I show it. Whereas I advance my h-pawn, looking like I'm going to try and open up lines on their king if they don't do anything. So they're going to want to probably push by. And so when they push by, well, now the pawn structure is actually closed here. It's actually not really possible from a pawn structure perspective for them to actually open lines of attack. And if they don't open lines of attack, then the king side is more or less locked up and closed, which actually makes my king really safe on the king side. And so I played a move most people wouldn't play, and that's to castle king side. Looks very scary with only one pawn in front of my king, but I think my king is safe enough. But okay, now that my king is safe enough, we have to ask ourselves, what is my worst piece on the board? I mean, this is a really good example for middle games because we are fully connected. Both rooks are connected, looking at each other. And so with all of our pieces developed, where do we go from here? I think a lot of people get stuck in a position like this. But this is a great opportunity to think, what is my worst piece? And at least from my perspective, I'd say my a1 rook. It's connected with the other rook, but it's not doing anything. It's still undeveloped in the corner, even though we're kind of out of the development stage of the opening. So what do I do? Well, after they played queen to e7, I want to double rooks. So I play rook to f2, they move their knight, and then I double rooks as planned. And now I've improved the location of this rook, and now all of my pieces are trying to get involved in the game. So thanks for stopping by, everyone. Hope these examples helped you. I'll see you in the next chess video.